I was out on a gig, and I got a phone call from an old pal of mine who said, I'm in Miami. I've been talking to this woman, and she wants to make a ballet company. And she asked him if he had any recommendations. And he said the best guy would be this guy named Villella. And he was trained by Balanchine. And so she calls and says, when are you coming? I'd like to meet you, get you to my house, and all of that. And I said, fine. And I get to Miami, and I walk in to her home, and it's, I don't know how to put it. It's, you know, I had been in all the grand houses of the supporters of ballet here in the city, and they were elegant, they were full of antiques and all of this. And I walk into this place, and it's basically vacant. And this one terrible piece of sculpture, I mean, just ugly beyond belief. And I said, oh God, what am I doing here? And then I start to meet the woman, and she was, how could I put it, not full of depth. There was certain vacancies about her. And anyway, it became this idea, do I want to get involved with this woman? And finally, as time goes by, she's putting together a bunch of people aboard, this and that. And I said, okay, you know, might as well take a shot at this thing. Plus, there's nothing here. I don't have to turn anything around. It can be anything and everything I want. I can start from the beginning. And that certainly appealed to me. Did not appeal to Linda. What she did not want to do was move into heat. So we spent 25 years there. But it took me 25 years, really, to build a company that I had, similar to the one I had come from. George Balanchine, Jerome Robbins, Lincoln Kirstein, who was the general director, and all of the people who supported that. And this was nothing like that. So it meant I had to inform the entire state of Florida. Plus, I had to make a national company so I could tour all over this country and finally bring it to Europe. Now that's a big deal, starting from nowhere and not knowing anything. And the general word out was, don't do anything in Florida, because they can't get anything done. They don't have a general history of art and sophistication. So I said, well, you know, okay, but it's a challenge. And I took it on. And as time was going by, I began to learn. And that was the most important idea, because I'd never done anything of that level. And as time was going by, the most important thing was I loved it. I loved building. I loved putting together something that could emulate where I had come from, the geniuses of what made the New York City Ballet, the New York City Ballet. And once I got started, I looked at the map, and I could see that there was Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and just a number of towns that were going on up the coast. And on the other side of the peninsula, there was another sophisticated place that had just built a theater. And I went, I met the woman who was running it, and she said, she took a look at me, had known my reputation, and had gathered her people around her. And the first thing she said to me was, "I want to buy you." Yeah, and I said, "Well, okay, but let me tell you, if I'm going to make it, it's going to be my point of decision, and I will make it similar to where I came from." And she was a tough old lady, and smart and connected. So I thought, well, okay, I've got a basis, I've got a plan, and it was early days, so Miami hadn't gotten theaters built. They were still building up in Palm Beach. They were still building in Fort Lauderdale, and the big deal was to finally get into these new beautiful theaters. And so I had a plan, and I thought, this is going to be, it could be fun. But I also understood that if you don't have people who are used to this, they will think they've run you and they own you. And that was the deal. And the oddity was, every place was different. And they all had their own egos, their own people who thought they knew everything and could tell you what to do. And these people would go to Russia and have a holiday, and they would go see the ballet in Russia. And it was, you could see why Balanchine left, because they were antiquated, and that was their information. And they all wanted me to emulate these old Russian points of departure. So I knew I really had a huge endeavor ahead of me. But the excitement was, I could make it anything I wanted it to be. And then you start to know who these people are. The first thing, they had a group of people who immediately said, the best place to make a ballet company is out at the airport because they have lots of space out there. They have areas that you could make studios out of. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. What the hell am I going to do with my dancers all day? What are the dancers going to do all day out at the airport? So it was interesting. And then I began to see that every place had its own series of leaders who were wealthy and wanted to have their hands on everything. But the other thing I found out was they had cliques. They had cliques everywhere. And these cliques would decide amongst their own cliques how much monies they would donate every year. So it became a labyrinth. So I decided it really was going to be personality clashes. And that's really what it became. And for instance, in Fort Lauderdale, I had found this place that was a hall from a university. And I had a full house, 1,200 people, and they didn't want to move. And then they were building this thing on the coast in Fort Lauderdale, and it was going to be a grand theater. So, and that was it. I was in the beginnings of something, and it was going to be a huge undertaking. That was it. We needed a facility that could become a home base. And there was a mall in Miami, and it was, it had better days. It had become shabby. It had become dangerous at night. We wouldn't let women out unless they were with a group. So it became awkward. And what we were doing was we were looking for space, and we found a space that used to be an old Bonwood Tellers. And within it, it had a vault for the furs. And they were literally these huge vaults. So we just built all around it. And then as time was going by, we had become the toast of Miami. and we had gotten the attention of the political area, and we had become the darlings of Miami. And as we were pushing up the coast, the places were beginning to evolve and develop. And it became apparent we needed one major facility, but it meant that we had to raise a huge amount of money. But the city wanted us because we would stimulate the areas. Then people, the famous thing at that time was flipping. And you would buy something and wait till it became successful, and then you flipped it, and you got the next thing. And that's how it was growing. And the crazy part of Miami at that time was the skylines were all cranes because the city was developing and evolving, and there were a lot of Israelis going to Miami and building, and they were sharp and, all of this very smart people. And that's how it evolved and developed. And I don't know if you've been in Miami lately. You don't want to go. It is so overbuilt. And it's like everything else. Once it gets going, it gets overbuilt. And that's what happened right up the coast. Right up the coast. And it was a good place to be because you were in early. And that's the way you have to do things at that time in Miami. And everybody was slipping and sliding. And as I said earlier, there are a lot of people who had gotten into trouble and came to hide out in Miami. So everything was a little shady, just a little shady, and sometimes not so shady. And then all of those lovely politicians went not only shady, they went dark. And it was, and you had to tiptoe your way through it. And there was a big television show, I think it was called Miami Vice. And that became sort of the signature of South Florida. So you had to slip and slide through all of that. And then Linda didn't want to talk about it, but she started to get to know the women who were married to people who worked for Balanchine or whatever their names were. Mm. And I can't have my picture taken. And it became fascinating and interesting. So we were terrifically legitimate, but we became this we were legitimizing all of the evolution of Miami. And the politicians, I forgot there was a phraseology that they talked to us about. But they gave us a square area of space right across from the beach. And there was a huge building right on the beach. So it was all laid out there for us. They gave us this space. We raised the money and built a 4-story building, which is obviously still there. 8 studios. 8. And they were, and you know, I got to know the architect, and I explained how I wanted to make these studios into theaters so that you could go between one huge studio and you could open the walls and it became a theater. And then we had seating that came out from the wall and there was a theater. And then we hung things and it was amazing what we were doing. And the height of the ceilings were 22 feet or something. And we had a great pal who had experience in all of this stuff. So he put wires across the ceilings and got mattresses and put them in so that you had acoustics.
For the sound, yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing what we did. And and people were coming to visit what we were doing from California, from here. They all wanted to emulate what we were doing.
So when did it start making money? After 5 years, 3 years?
You know, we were, well, what I started to do was I had every weekend I had performances. And that began to stimulate this mall that went from east to west. And that developed the mall back to its original circumstance. So again, we became famous. And we had, obviously, Miami never had the level of ballet that I was going to bring to it. And we got to the point where we were beginning to attract New York City Ballet people. So I could develop a company that was at the highest level.